Good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you are tuned in listening to this video. My name is Tsepiso Thusi. I'm a qualified counseling psychologist. I'm here to speak to you today on behalf of the Sinawe Foundation SA, which is a non-profit organization founded on the premise of fighting against gender-based violence and supporting survivors thereof. Sinawa Foundation is also aimed at addressing the root cause of gender-based violence, and while it aims to support women and children, it also recognizes the need to engage men and boy children to understand the phenomenon further. So this is exactly what I'll be talking about to you today from a point of view of a psychologist. I will be engaging with you with regards to issues around mental health and gender-based violence. So first and foremost, what you need to know when it comes to gender-based violence and mental health is that there's been many studies from in the field of social science that confirm that poor mental health and there's a correlation between poor mental health and aggressive behavior or emotional dysfunctional patterns. So what do I mean by correlation is that there is there's a relationship between poor mental health or lack thereof and aggressive behavior or dysfunctional behavior or emotional disruptive behaviors. So it is very important that, well, in this case, when I'm talking about dysfunctional behavior and aggressive behavior, I'm trying to explain what really we'll be engaging in today, which is behaviors associated with gender-based violence. So when we speak of gender-based violence, we cannot ignore the importance of mental health because, like I mentioned earlier, there is a correlation between those two. So what is mental health? So let's get to understanding that first. Mental health has to do with psychological, emotional, and social functioning. So it's the well functioning of these three things. So there's many definitions. You can go over and look for it. But basically for today's talk, I want us to understand that mental health is the functioning of these three things. Your psychological, so it means how you're thinking. What is your perspective on the world? How do you understand things? Emotional, which is going to be very critical in today's discussion. So how do we handle emotional distress? How do we regulate ourselves when we're under distress? So psychological, emotional, and social. So social is, how is your social system? What is around you? How do you engage with your surroundings? So mental health is based on those three things. So we have now an understanding of what is mental health. But before we move on and understand any further understandings of gender-based violence, I firstly want to describe and give it a little bit of a definition as well. So I have something here I want to read to you that describes the term gender-based violence. So gender-based violence is an umbrella term for any harm that is perpetuated against an individual's will, right? So this has a negative impact on that person's psychological, physical, developmental, and identity of the person, and is a result of engendered power inequality. So I won't go on into any to further details about the many forms of gender-based violence because that's a workshop on its own as well. But basically on this definition, you can hear that gender-based violence involves harm or danger imposed on another person, and it is a result of gender inequality. So there's power dynamics there between between the genders involved. The victim is affected in terms of their psychological well-being, is affected in terms of their identity as well, their development and their emotional well-being. So all of these things, as I mentioned earlier, that there is a correlation between mental health and gender-based violence. So What I'm basically trying to explain here is that usually perpetrators, people that cause harm to victims in terms of their gender, emotions, like I mentioned earlier in the definition, these perpetrators have, there's been studies that confirm that these perpetrators have lack or poor mental health or lack of mental health. So like I mentioned earlier, it's very important to engage in mental health behaviors, because all of these things can lead to dysfunctional ways of relating to our societies and make us vulnerable to to be perpetrators of gender-based violence. So the interesting thing now when it comes to mental health, especially with regards to men, is that according to my practice as a psychologist, I've had the privilege of working across different races, different cultures, age groups, religious background, learned and unlearned people, rich and poor, and I found that in my experience that men usually don't seek mental health services, but what is realistic and remains consistent is that conflicts, problems, stress, depression is gender indifferent. Everybody experiences problems. Everybody experiences conflicts, depression, and stress. But if I had to make just a rough estimate, out of 10 patients that I see, 8 will be women and 2 would be men. So it raises a huge concern as to the fact that us men don't usually engage in mental health seeking behaviors. Now, because men often do not seek mental health services or address issues of mental health, we as men often find ourselves being then vulnerable or at risk of dysfunctional ways of coping with the 3 things that I mentioned earlier: our psychological well-being, our emotional well-being, and the way we engage socially with our surroundings. But one might ask then that why don't we engage in mental health services or take care of our mental health as men? There's many reasons to that, but I'm gonna try and make it very simplistic. As growing up as a man in society as well, I've understood that there is a way that us men are socialized from childhood, you know, from the way we grow up in our families and the way we even relate to our friends and other relationships outside. There's a way in which we are socialized. Men are not socialized to ask for help. Men are not socialized to to engage emotionally or to talk about distressing stuff. It starts at a very young age, where there's this language that men don't cry. We have to be in control of the situation all the time. We have to always be stronger. If somebody in your family is showing any sense of being emotionally distressed, there's this pressure from you as a man to be the stronger one. So you know, we have this macho stance, you know, that we have to have situations under control. We view emotional distress as a sign of weakness. And this is a conversation we have with friends. This is a conversation even with our families from a very young age. And in psychology, we understand that most of the ways we are shaped and develop later in life begins in early childhood. And I just want to talk a little bit more about this socialization of men. I want to make a typical example of myself. when I grew up, I remember one incident where I was owing a friend of mine some money. I don't remember what it was, but what happened there is my friend threatened me. He threatened to um, a fight of some sort, but I was very distressed. The point is, I was very emotionally distressed and worried because I was very scared that I couldn't pay what I was owing to him, and I didn't know what to do. I went to my aunt. I was crying. I said, "Auntie, help me. My friend wants his money," and he said he'll hit me tomorrow at school. Um, Now, I just want you to follow how the responses, the difference between when I went to my aunt and then when I went to my father. My aunt hugged me while I was crying and said, "It'll all be all right." And she gave me the money. I took the money, went to my friend the next day, gave him the money, and to my surprise, it was short. I don't know if there was some kind of bullying or it was short. I don't remember. But I do remember that I had to go again and ask for more money. But this time around, I went home and my father was there. And I went to my father crying again, saying, "My friend is threatening to harm me. Please give me some money. I need to pay him off. I borrowed him some money at school." My father angrily said, "Why are you crying? You are a man," which is common discourse or common language that we use throughout our development. "Why are you crying? You're a man. You're not supposed to be crying. You're supposed to be strong," So what he did then is he called to my brother. He said, "Go take a pillow for your younger brother." So my dad took a pillow, he put it right to his chest, and he said, "Punch here. Punch on this pillow. And then tomorrow, I want you to show that you're a man, that you're strong, and you're going to fight for yourself." I look up to this man. One day I'll grow up and be a man. So to me at that point, it made sense that, okay, so this is how I resolve it. This is how I work through it. So with confidence and encouragement, I punched on the pillow, was boxing it, punching it hard. Next morning, went to school, brave, confident. Okay, if he comes to me, I will fight. Long story cut short, I don't remember what really happened, but eventually we didn't get through it. But the point here that I'm trying to make is that instead of addressing how I felt, I then learned that I have to defend myself through fighting for myself. I have to defend myself through aggression. And that is the way that we commonly talk about emotions, psychological distress as men, as young men, as teenagers. That, no, you cannot cry over something. You have to be strong. You have to be a man. You have to show that you're in control of situations all the time. But what really happens is that we are stuck. We carry a lot of baggages as men. I mentioned earlier that conflicts, problems, stress, depression is something that us men we also experience, But the problem is that as compared to our women in society who are often allowed to express these emotions, we are socialized to ignore them, reject them, and instead show our aggression or our masculinity or that we are tough, And so we carry through these languages, but we are then stuck carrying these burdens. That is why you realize that most men are struggling with mental health. You'll find that most studies confirm that in any country, most of the people that are in jail are men. Most of the people that are on drugs are men. Most of the people that commit suicide are men. Most of the people that are on drugs are men again. So really, we are facing a really tough way of relating as men, because all of these things that I just mentioned right now suggest that there's something we need to change about the way we relate to each other as men, because this is causing problems. This is having us at risk of many of the dysfunctional ways of relating into the world. So In conclusion, I would like to say that during this month, as we recognize men in our society, I would like to say that it's time that we take care of ourselves, especially our mental health, but not forgetting every other aspect of our lives, our social, our emotional well-being as well. And I would like to say to all men that let us remember who we are as men in our role as men in society. And being a man involves being the protector of our people, being a role model for our family and our younger men growing up. Being a man involves showing love and kindness and good leadership skills. It has nothing to do with the aggression that we are commonly known of in nowadays, um, controlling behavior that is completely has set us backwards as men. We as men have to set an example of good interpersonal relations, of good leadership skills, of love and kindness. And these are the qualities that we do have. But because of the many things that were spoken about earlier, sometimes we haven't been allowed, or rather opened ourselves to good aspects or good environment of engaging in healthier parts of ourselves. But I hope during this month that we do remember to take care of ourselves and just treat this month as time to remember to do things differently. Thank you.